The air in these chambers, thick with secrets, heavy with the cloying scent of jasmine and the sharp edge of ambition. Carved panels, each intricate curve a silent witness to 1,000 whispered plots. My own shadow, stretched long by the dimming lanterns of the approaching dawn, became one with the cold, unyielding stone of the pillar where I stood. Here, amidst such opulence, even the dust motes danced with a purpose far beyond their fleeting existence. And silence. Silence was never truly empty within these walls. It was the most dangerous music of all, a prelude to the inevitable. Silence. Not the kind found in a crypt where peace finally settles, but the kind that precedes a dagger's thrust, sharp and certain. Then, a sound, so delicate, so utterly out of place, it barely disturbed the heavy air. The faint, rhythmic whisper of a quill across parchment. A solitary scratch, insistent, clandestine. It was a fragile thread, potent beyond its simplicity, pulling at the very fabric of that suffocating quiet. And then, as abruptly as it began, it ceased. A sudden, almost physical rupture, leaving behind a void more profound, more menacing than before. Once, through a slit in the heavy embroidered curtain that guarded the Sultan's private thoughts, I saw something not meant for mortal eyes. And no one, ever, was meant to hear it. My gaze, a thief in the night, found it. A sliver of ivory parchment, just barely visible, peeking from beneath the heavy, blood-red satin of a divan cushion. A mere corner, yet it screamed of hidden truths, of a world teetering on the precipice of ruin. A single, bold stroke of ink, a half-glimpsed seal, enough to unravel a dynasty, to stain a bloodline with eternal shame. Whose hand, I wondered, guided that quill with such silent, terrifying intent? A sultana's, perhaps? What desperate plea, what ruthless command, what poison of words lay folded within that forbidden message? Questions, like unseen executioners, hung heavy in the perfumed air, awaiting their moment. For in this labyrinthine palace of whispers, where the game of queens is played with silk and shadow, with charm and chilling calculation, such letters are not merely words, they are weapons. Sharper than any blade, deadlier than any venom. They are the true currency of power, traded in the shadowed chambers of those who seek to rule not by decree, but by deception. And the ultimate cost of their discovery? Extinction. The silence. It hung, thick and velvet-like, absorbing every distant breath, every unspoken fear that lingered in the Sultan's chamber. A silence that promised both oblivion and revelation. A heavy shroud cast over a court where every shadow held a whisper. But even silence cannot hold forever in these gilded cages. A rustle, barely a tremor, a sound born of the finest Bursa silk brushing against ancient marble, breaking the stillness with the softness of a deferred judgment. And then she appeared. A figure sculpted from moonlight and ambition, gliding with an effortless grace that belied the immense weight of the dynasty she carried. Her steps, precise and measured, barely disturbed the intricate floral patterns woven into the silken carpets beneath her feet. Each movement, a masterstroke in a ballet of power. Do you see her? Her gaze, dark pools in the subdued light, held the glint of sharpened steel, piercing and relentless, capable of dissecting truth from deceit with a single, unblinking assessment. This is no ordinary woman walking through the opulent halls of Topkapi. Not a woman, but a force. Not a mother, but a dynasty. Her beauty, a shimmering shield against the world's crude blows, a distraction for lesser minds. Her mind, however, is a Damascus blade, honed on centuries of cunning, on the bloodline's relentless demand for survival. Every gem that adorned her, from the pearls nestled against her throat to the emeralds that flashed on her fingers, caught the sparse light, throwing back cold, hard glints. Her caftan, heavy with gold thread and rich brocade, seemed not to adorn her, but to burden her, each stitch a responsibility, each fold a secret. The very fabric, it seemed, pressed down, a tangible representation of the empire's weight on her slender shoulders. In this palace, understand this, every breath taken, every whispered word exchanged, every gesture, no matter how trivial, is a part of an intricate, merciless game. A game for the survival of the bloodline, for the preservation of power, for the very breath of the Sultanate. It is a world where alliances are woven with threads of betrayal and loyalty, where the sweetest nectar often conceals the deadliest poison. Then, a gesture, almost imperceptible. A wisp of silk, dyed the color of pomegranate seeds, slipped from her fingers. It drifted, a silent crimson leaf, to rest upon the patterned carpet, a fleeting splash of color against the muted grandeur. Was it a moment of distraction? A fleeting slip of innocence in a life devoid of it? Or a deliberate sign, a calculated hint sewn into the very fabric of the court's complex tapestry? Here, even a dropped scarf can be a whispered word, a calculated move in the grand design. This world, beloved observer, is where the game of queens is not a metaphor. It is a verdict. It is a sentence. And for many, it is a death warrant. The night in the Topkapi could be a shroud, soft as the finest silk, yet heavy enough to smother a scream. It was a silence that held its breath, thick with the unsaid, a darkness where shadows danced with secrets too dangerous for the light of day. Within the gilded cage of the harem, where every whisper carried the weight of a decree, the air grew taut. The rhythm, once a slow, deliberate march of power, began to quicken, a drumbeat felt in the very marrow of the stones. It happened under the cover of darkness, when even the walls, it seemed, held their breath, listening. Not in the grand halls, nor amidst the clamor of the kitchens, but in the private chambers of the Sultana, where the scent of jasmine and ambition mingled. A young maid, new to the palace's intricate dance, moved with the quiet grace taught by years of fear. Her task, a routine one, was to prepare the Sultana's wardrobe for the morning. Her fingers, accustomed to the delicate feel of embroidered silk and velvet, brushed against something foreign, something rigid, tucked haphazardly amongst the folds of a discarded gown. An envelope. Plain, unadorned, save for the single, crimson mark of the imperial seal. It lay there, carelessly discarded, as if tossed aside in a moment of haste or reckless confidence. The girl's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within her chest. She knew of the seal. Every soul within these walls knew its power, its sacred duty to protect the secrets of the dynasty, to stand as a silent guardian of the bloodline. Yet here it was, not pristine, not whole. A tremor ran through her hand as she instinctively reached for it. The wax, once a proud, unbroken circle, was now fractured. A jagged line, like a lightning strike across a crimson sky, split its surface. A crack, yes. Not a clean break, but a violent tear, as if fate itself had driven a wedge into the very foundation of the empire. She traced the fault line with a trembling finger, feeling the sharp edges of destiny. And then, the parchment, exposed. A scroll of soft, aged vellum, unfurling slightly from its broken binding. The ink, black as the deepest shadows of the palace, had bled in places, blurring the elegant script. It spread across the fibrous surface like a dark stain, like ancient, spilled blood seeping into the earth, staining the very ground upon which their lives were built. A cold dread seeped into her bones. This was no ordinary letter. This was a wound. This was the moment. The culmination of 1,000 whispered intrigues, of shadows cast by unseen hands, of ambitions sharpened in the crucible of power. The whispers of treason, once ethereal and fleeting, had found their material form, their damning embodiment. This broken seal, this bleeding ink, was more than just proof. It was a declaration, a shattering of the silence that had long protected the Sultana's deepest secrets. Now, everything was at stake. Not just the life of a single woman, however powerful, however beloved. Not just her place in the Sultan's affections, nor her children's claim to the throne. No. Far more ancient, far more terrifying forces had been roused. The future of her bloodline, the very continuity of the Ottoman dynasty, hung by a single, fragile thread. And the breaking of that seal? It severed it. The girl stood frozen, the damning evidence clutched in her hand. The night, which had promised to conceal, now revealed. And the walls, once silent witnesses, were about to become unwilling bearers of a truth that would shake the empire to its very foundations. The game of queens had just turned deadly, and the price of losing was absolute oblivion. The air, once thick with the scent of fear and the unspoken threat, settled, not into peace, but into something far more chilling, the heavy blanket of silence. A silence that hummed with knowledge, 1,000 invisible eyes watching, judging. No screams echoed from the courtyard, no heads rolled in the dust of the imperial square. The Sultan, a force of nature barely contained, had merely looked. Yes, a single, deliberate glance. A gaze that held the weight of centuries, the power of life and death, and a silent, terrible understanding. It had swept over her, a shadow across her very soul, then moved on, dismissing her, yet sealing her fate. And with it, a gesture. A hand, perhaps, resting for but a breath upon the gilded hilt of his ceremonial dagger. A flicker, a promise. And in that whisper of motion, her world, once vast and shimmering with ambition, had contracted. Shrunk to the confines of her own mind, her own gilded cage. Do you understand the terror of a silence so profound it screams? The morning light, usually a gentle caress, now felt like a harsh interrogation, stripping bare every secret, every hidden thought. And with the dawn came the sherbet. A silver tray, delicate porcelain, the ruby liquid swirling, fragrant with rose and honey. So sweet, deceptively so. It arrived as always, carried by a young eunuch, his face impassive, yet in the slight tremor of his hand she read the universal whisper, "They know." She took the cup. Her fingers, adorned with emeralds that once sparkled with triumph, now felt leaden. The scent rose, cloying, mocking. Each fragrant note a reminder of what awaited, what had already begun. She raised it to her lips, a queen performing the most ordinary ritual, yet every nerve ending alight. Was it poison? Not the quick, merciful kind, but the slow, insidious poison of suspicion, of dread, of utter isolation. She drank, a measured sip, the sweetness coating her tongue, mingling with the bitter taste of what she now understood. The game, my friends, it never ends. It simply changes its rules, its weapons. Was she a traitor, truly? Or merely a creature forged in the crucible of this court, learning to breathe the very air of intrigue, to fight for a sliver of power, for the survival of her bloodline? To condemn her is easy. To walk in her silk slippers, a different story entirely. Her eyes, once bright with cunning and desire, now held a deeper, colder glint. A quiet despair, yes, but also a stark, unwavering resolve. She saw it all reflected in the polished surface of the sherbet, the vast, intricate web of the dynasty, the shadows that danced behind every pillar, the absolute certainty that the price for those secret letters had been set. Unspoken, unwritten, and heavier than any executioner's blade. The silence. That was the sentence. A life lived perpetually on the precipice, every breath a calculation, every smile a lie. The game continued, and she, the Sultana, was still a player. But now, she played not for victory, but for survival. And the price was everything. The last whisper has finally died, or so it seems. A heavy, almost sacred silence descends upon these hallowed stones, filling the vast spaces once vibrant with raw ambition and chilling fear. But do not be deceived by this deceptive peace. This is not an end. This is merely the quiet after the storm, the breath held taut before the next gust of wind rips through the very heart of the dynasty. Look closely now, around these empty, majestic halls. Where once the finest silk rustled against marble, where a hidden dagger could gleam beneath a velvet sleeve, where a single, calculating glance could seal a fate, now only the dust dances, caught in the fleeting, stray beams of light. What truly remains of those grand intrigues? The chilling, indelible understanding that such is the game. A game steeped in shadows and blood, played on a stage of opulence and betrayal. Here, there are no true heroes, no absolute villains, merely players bound by the roles they seize. There are only those cunning enough to endure, to survive the crucible, and those who inevitably become nothing but dust beneath these cold, unyielding floors. Their whispers, thin as the finest thread of silk, still drift through these endless corridors of Topkapi, a haunting, timeless symphony. Each hushed word, each stolen glance across a crowded feast, every secret letter penned in the dead of night, every silent sigh of despair or triumph, they echo, persistent and stark, reminding us of the terrible, unceasing price paid. The price of a bloodline preserved, of a crown maintained, of a legacy brutally forged in the fire of ceaseless betrayal. The immense, crushing weight of power, you see, is never truly lifted. It merely shifts, a relentless burden passed from one generation's stooped shoulders to the next. This unbroken chain of sacrifice and treachery, of ambition and despair, stretches back through countless ages, anchoring every dynasty, every empire, in the very soil it claims to rule. It is a cruel, magnificent cycle that knows no end. Only new faces eager to play the ancient, ruthless roles. And as the last vestiges of light finally fade from these grand, silent chambers, leaving them to their ancient secrets and their restless ghosts, one truth remains etched deeper than any inscription in their crumbling walls: blood and silk, poison and dynasty. In this palace, beneath this merciless sky, nothing, absolutely nothing, is left to chance.